Geoff Hess is someone I've wanted to host for years at this point. I was first familiar with him as the CEO of Analog Shift, only to later meet him at a private collectors gathering here in San Diego. He's one of the most engaging people I've met through this hobby. He always has something intelligent to say, and overall, he's just the kind of guy with whom I want to surround myself. Oh, yeah, and he started a little meeting called Rolliefest. Geoff was gracious enough to include me in this year's festivities in New York City, an experience I won't soon forget. He and I discuss his time working with Ivanka Trump, his foray into watches, the watch he considers to have been the hardest to acquire, how important honesty is, and how being a father has changed him. I have the utmost respect for Geoff, so I'm confident you'll enjoy what he has to say. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard Age Podcast. First of all, Rolliefest, unreal. Wow. First of all, thank you. I guess I should have started there.
Thank you.
You really host what I can only describe as an unparalleled event. It's the best watch event I've ever attended, bar none, hands down.
Well, that's incredibly kind of you. It's a great labor of love. And obviously, it's just about shared passion and community. It's a completely non-commercial event. There's nothing for sale. There's no, brand trying to sell you anything. And it's really just in the spirit of being together and sharing the human connections and, of course, the watches. And I'm grateful that you were a part of it. Obviously, thank you for having me today. But you're very kind, and it's the messages I've received in the past week have been truly heartwarming.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I mean, I've seen a lot of them obviously online from reposts and such. You started this in 2019. Why? Like what? Because this is like pre-COVID, obviously, right? So like the appreciation of the human connection was a little different in 2019 than say 2022 or 20 or now.
Well, I am 56 years old, so I've been a watch collector for literally 35 years. So I'm starting to get up there. Um, and I hate to admit that, but it's true. Um, and prior to 2019, um, of course, I was going to watch events, but they were almost entirely outside of the United States.
Okay.
The one that's most notable for me is the Rolex Passion meeting, which was similarly an invitation only meeting that I went to for year after year. That was founded by Philip Stahl and Bernard Bullybear of Bulling and Sons. And um, that was always held in Europe, typically in Maastricht in the Netherlands. And then I was often going to other events like P Day for the Panerai community, and that too was almost never in the US. So I felt as though there were no sort of real meaningful, purely collector driven events, not brand backed, not like Go Watches and Wonders or anything like that in the United States. And a lot of people were saying that we really should have something in the US. So they urged me to do that, some
Sure.
friends. And I did it in 2019. I remember we had 110 people there from 12 countries. So it was about half the size of the Rolliefest from last week. And it was a ton of fun, and B, received much better than I had anticipated.
Hmm.
Needless to say, when I started Rolliefest in 2019, I had no vision of it becoming a regular event or something that happens every other year. It was really a one-off. Let's do a fun thing once, and it was received so well that it kind of took off. In that year, we rented the Intrepid aircraft. I say we, I rented the Intrepid aircraft carrier for the gala dinner. So we sat and had dinner amongst the airplanes. Super cool. Then the watch sharing lunch, if you will, the next day was in the Palace Hotel on Madison Avenue. And it was just a lot of fun and again, better received than I could have imagined. It was very touching. And it was then that I decided, okay, I'll do it again in 2 years. It really does take about a year of planning. It's an enormous endeavor. So it's not something that should probably be done every year. It's an every other year kind of thing. So I intended to do it again in 2021, but then that thing called COVID hit.
Yeah.
Um, and it got derailed for a little while. And and then I ended up doing it in 2023. And again, of course, last week.
Yeah. How do you how does one rent the Intrepid? How does one get these venues like One World Trade and the Met?
You know, some of the venues are easier to access than others. The Intrepid wasn't terribly difficult. You can do it. You don't just, it's not like making a dinner reservation, but it is available. By far, the hardest was the Metropolitan Museum, where we held our gala dinner last week. That was a real challenge. They
Really?
couldn't have been more professional. Um, it is a really well-oiled machine, but it's very strict. Every event is vetted. Um, it was difficult and it took a long time. And the level of detail to which they scrutinize to protect their institution is really astonishing, down to approving every item in the gift bag, needing to see pictures, couldn't add anything at the last minute. Every camera you needed to provide them with the make and model. Most of the flower centerpieces had to be approved by them and where they were placed on each table. So even like the taller flower arrangements had to be moved to row 2 because they didn't want them in row 3. You know, they're very strict,
Wow.
but I understood it. I understood it, and it was very professional. So that was harder the Intrepid, but yeah, these are iconic New York institutions.
Yeah, unbelievable. As far as security goes, are you borrowing from each establishment, or is that like a Sotheby's thing where you just hire them for the couple of events, or like how, or do you work for a private age or work with a private agency to hire out that help?
Great question. So first and foremost, no question, safety is paramount, and it is the most important part of the event, bar none. There's safety, and everything else almost doesn't matter. That's the
Yeah.
most important thing. So, what does that mean? That first means that, as you know, I don't tell anyone where the locations are until about a week out. So, the invitation that you receive, say 5, 6 months out, says New York City on dates, but it doesn't tell you where. Then a week out, I send this itinerary, and this year it was done through a password protected um, website that I built, Rolliefest.com. And um, and that's where the locations were revealed. And even then, you were told to go to the Met. You didn't know where in the Met. So
Right.
first and foremost, the first layer of security is the secrecy of it. Um, in a way, it's kind of fun. People don't know where they're, going until the last minute. But I'm not doing it for fun. I'm doing it for safety. And you can see on the invitation in my emails, it is very adamant about confidentiality and not sharing that information with anybody.
Right.
Next, as you know, when you walk into each venue, there's a big sign I print that says no posting of any kind until after we leave. And everybody respects that. So there's no posting until after we leave. So no live streaming of any kind. So there's that level of security. Then, in terms of physical presence, let's call it men with guns. They're there, they're in the room, and I'm using both Sotheby's security, um, led by a guy named Chris Wendler, who's just spectacular, and his team. And of course, each of the venues has their own security. So it's a combination of both. It does differ from venue to venue of what you can have there. Some venues allow the outside security, some don't. Um, and then, really, most importantly, each of the venues are chosen with security in mind. Penetrating the Metropolitan Museum or getting to the 102nd floor of the World Trade Center would be nearly impossible.
Right.
You know, so um, Moreover, the credential, you're given a credential, which is this metal dog tag, which I did in the last 2 years. It's got painted enamel and it has everybody's name engraved. And there was very, very simple rule that if you didn't have that credential, you couldn't come in, period,
Right.
without exception. So, I feel like we really buttoned it up.
Yeah.
And I'm proud to say that in all three events, we haven't had so much as a dollar go missing, let alone a watch, nothing, no incidents of any kind. It is safety is the most paramount. And
Amazing.
everybody needs to feel comfortable when they're there.
Yeah. I think you and I both know these things, obviously, aside from safety and watches, it's really about the people. Um, uh, if it were a bunch of jerks, it would be a completely different vibe, right? Like it would just. I said yesterday on a live podcast, my little pit stops that I do, that you know it, it's lacking in pretension, even though it's such an elevated experience, and that is, I find, really only common when everybody's on the same page emotionally. I think not necessarily financially, but emotionally.
I think that comes, first of all, thank you for saying that. And you couldn't have said a nicer thing because that's exactly the climate that I want to create.
Sure.
And, um, and that's certainly intentional. I think it comes from a few things. First of all, it's obviously an invitation only event. Virtually everyone in that room is somebody whom I'm friends with. So I know everybody in the room.
Yeah.
It wasn't intended to be an event where I make sure every dealer and every big collector was there. It's not dissimilar from a wedding. I invited my friends.
Right.
Some I know better than others, but I know everybody in that room. Bryn Wallner, who wrote the piece for GQ that dropped yesterday, and I just adore her, dime piece for anybody that doesn't know her.
Yeah.
She said it best. She said there were definitely no randos. And I just laughed with her, no randos. So I thought that was so well said. So look, we know everybody there, and everybody knows what the spirit of the event is. Moreover, um, everybody's paying their own way. Now, look, there's no question about it. Sotheby's contributes. I had a nice sponsorship from Watch Check, the watch servicing endeavor
Yep.
so many of us are involved in. And then in addition, I put money in. So it's a financial, it's not a profitable thing. I lose money. But the point is the fact that everybody pays their own way lends itself to the notion of, hey, we're all here, we all paid our own way, we were invited, we're all building this together.
Sure.
It wasn't, a big brand inviting me and I'm on a press trip and I have to wave the flag. No, you paid to be there. You can, you helped cover the cost.
Yeah.
And and I think that helps. So the combination between that, the fact that it's completely non-commercial, you didn't see a single company sign on the door anywhere. There's no branding on the wall of any kind other than the name Rolliefest, obviously. Um, and the fact that it's invitation only, and I know everybody in the room, lends itself to this, creates that environment of, hey, there's no pretension. We're here really just to share passion. And again, I think my welcome speech was really geared toward that sentiment.
Yeah. 100%. One thing I appreciated the other day was Kevin Odell, through his Instagram stories, was talking about his attendance and his experience and his sentiments. Um,
I
name,
watched and heard it.
yeah, namely just how, it keeps getting better. This was my first one. Kevin's, I think, now been to three. He claimed that this one was his favorite, primarily just due to the diversity of watches. I mean, I think subconsciously, maybe less than subconsciously, maybe very consciously, Rolliefest may imply it's all about Rolex. And maybe once upon a time it was maybe skewed a little bit heavier towards that. but he was really, really appreciative of the diversity in watches that were present. It was my first, as I said, so it was all new to me, but I couldn't agree with him more. I mean, you can't deny the diversity that was there. I mean, it was truly unreal. Is there any sort of feedback and or opinions that you could give on how that's evolved? Or obviously it's probably not intentional because you can't tell people what to bring, right?
Yeah, it's funny. Uh, I think that diversity comes from a few things. Um, Most importantly, the diversity of the crowd.
Sure.
First of all, we had 209 people. I haven't counted how many countries were represented, but it's a lot. So you have a very diverse audience.
Hmm.
There are, men, women, different cultures, different languages, older, younger, anywhere from Gen Zs to 70-year-olds, and so it was a very diverse audience. So it's not that surprising that you'll see different tastes.
Right.
The name Rolly, yes, that's slang for Rolex, but the Rolliefest was just a name I invented years ago. It's funny, most people don't know I was choosing between Rolliefest and Rollypalooza, and I went with Rolliefest. That was in 2018 when I was thinking about um, naming the event. But that really comes from my Instagram, which is Manhattan Rolly. I wasn't thinking Rolex, and if you see each of the invitations and multiple times in the emails, I always say all brands welcome. It's
Sure.
not meant to be an event to highlight Rolex. It was sort of misbranded, but I think that was really now that's really known because if you saw the watch table, every brand was out there. There were hundreds of watches of all different brands. So I think um, yeah, like, communicating to people, hey, this isn't an event just to celebrate Rolex, it's a event to celebrate watch passion, bring anything, all brands welcome. I think that's so clear. And the fact that you had such a diverse group in attendance suggests that sure, different tastes will be there. We saw vintage, we saw modern, we saw big watches, small watches, and of all kinds. Um, What's interesting is touching on the security again, it is an unusual period of time in the world, and there are enhanced fears about traveling with watches, in
Mhm.
particularly for those traveling internationally and coming over the border and having to go through customs with watches. It's different than when I was going to those Rolex passion meetings, 15 years ago or whatever, where it wasn't as strict. So I feared that the watch table in the middle would actually not be terribly crowded. I worried about that. Um, for whatever reason, I'm just so pleased it wasn't the case. And in
Right.
fact, one of the constructive criticisms I heard is that the center watch table wasn't long enough. It was hard to get to the table and there wasn't any space. So if I were doing it over, I would have added another table and made it longer. So I never thought that we would have that kind of spread,
Yeah.
which was obviously a good problem to have. Um, but yeah, clearly, despite the very, valid and legitimate fears of traveling with watches and going on airplanes with them in the world that we're in, it clearly had no effect on what was brought and the quantity or the quality. That table was full, and that was really tantamount. That was like opening a bank without a vault. I mean, that was extraordinary.
Yeah.
And again, I keep going back to that word heartwarming. It was really heartwarming to see.
Yeah. These episodes are typically about you, the person, less about your businesses and such. So, but on the topic of diversity in watches, what are you into these days? You kind of got your start with Panerai, which maybe you could tell the story of that. But what have you been into lately?
I can't say I'm into any one particular thing.
Hmm.
Um, so many of us know the great collector and great human being John Field, Beaumont Miller on Instagram.
Oh yeah.
He years ago um, um, created this notion of the collecting arc, which I've thought about so many times. And in essence, he said, in the beginning, you'll buy um, let's pretend it's a Daytona. You start out and you buy a Daytona. Maybe you buy a Zenith Daytona. And then in time, you say, I really aspire to get a big red 6263. And you move up the chain and you buy that. And then you start to think, my real dream is a Paul Newman. And you save, and then you climb the tree and you buy the Paul Newman, and it's a pumper pusher. And then you go, God, I really want a screw pusher. That's the next level up, a 6263 or a 6265. And you do that, and you trade the other one, you move up, and now you're at the top of the arc. Then after you've owned that watch for a while, you start to say, I miss having that the smaller pumper pusher, or I miss having that big red. I think I'm going to let go of the big trophy grail. And you start to go back down the arc. And you might end up with a Patrizi Zenith Daytona, having once had a screw pusher Paul Newman. And that, I think, rings so true. I didn't invent this. That's John's sort of brilliance. And I have found that to be the case with me. And I've certainly found that to be the case with a lot of collectors and a lot of different references. I went through that journey with Daytonas. I certainly went through the journey with Submariners. At the end of the day, though, I love watches. I still love a lot of the old Panerais. I'm still obviously most known for vintage Rolex, which is what I probably love the most.
Yeah.
Lord knows I still love Hoyer and I collect that. And it is just, I love watches. I've started to discover Hermes watches, as some people
Sure.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can't really say there's any one thing I'm collecting. I'm still a collector of varied brands.
We're both big Longa fans, but what was your last purchase? Was it an Hermes?
My last purchase, actually, no. Um, my last purchase was a Panerai.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, it was from the year 2000. It was an eBay watch. It was the PAM 108, which is a 40 millimeter chronograph in titanium and steel with a zenith movement. And I had it once, let's say 17, 18 years ago,
Wow.
and let it go. And there were 100 pieces, so it's tough to find. And I recently paid $8,500 for it. That used to trade between 20 and 25,000 at the height, and that's been a part of the joy of collecting. In that there is ebb and flow, and prices escalate sometimes, and they come down, obviously. And in that instance, it felt so good to buy that thing that I used to love and missed having, the collecting arc, and I'm back, doing that, and to get it at that price. And look, that's fair market value. It's eBay. It's probably not worth much more. I think I got a good price, but it just feels good to buy something at a price point like that when at one time you were paying double or triple.
Yeah, totally. Who was Geoff in high school?
Great question. I think I've definitely always been a social person.
Mm-hmm.
I did have the benefit of going to a private high school. I went to Horace Mann High School in New York. So, I definitely worked hard.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely always liked watches. Even in high school, that started. It started in earnest a little bit past that. My big thing in high school was wrestling. I was on the wrestling team for 4 years. So that
No
was the
way.
thing I was sort of most into. Certainly you don't see me wrestling anytime soon. But yeah, so, I was always emaciated, cutting weight for wrestling. I wrestled 129 pounds, when I was 18, and I'm
Wow.
159 now. So I was, skin and bones, but I loved doing that at Horace Mann. That was spectacular. In a funny way, there's some tie to watches, because every year the Horace Mann wrestling team from then still gets together religiously. It's only once a year for a dinner. We're not sharing watches, but we're sharing the company.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really turns out to be about the people. I mean, that's more of a standard reunion. But
Cool.
yeah, that was me in high school. I was always social. I was a B student, BB plus. I
Okay.
was never a brainiac. I was never a straight A guy. I was a B student at a very good high school. I worked really hard. Loved wrestling. Always been a big sports fan for those that know me. Huge hockey fan, huge New York Rangers fan,
Nice.
and yeah, that was me. I think I was relatively, I don't know, average, if you would.
Okay. Nice. Well, you're above average now in my book, and that isn't me kissing ass. It's
Yeah,
just,
thank you.
it's true. I'm curious though, how did you connect with Ivanka Trump to work with her jewelry line, and like, what were you doing with her?
So, um, in I got a call from her financial partner in 2012 asking if I would come aboard as her CEO to
Got
help
it.
run her jewelry company, her global jewelry company. I think I had developed a reputation. I'm a lawyer. I'm a former recovering lawyer, and I had developed a reputation of sort of just knowing how to get things done and cutting through things and building things. And yeah, I got that surprise call that day, and I ended up running that company for 4 years and absolutely loved it. Um, I'd never met. I met the president once, but I didn't know him. I mean, she stood on her own. I only worked with her.
Right.
Think she's terrific. She's really born in a boardroom, super, super smart and articulate. And that's not being political in any way, shape, or form. I'm just
No.
talking about Ivanka, the business person. For almost the entire period I was there was no talk of Donald Trump running for president or anything like that. So this
Oh
had
wow.
nothing to do with that. That was, I mean, he didn't run till 2016. So
Right.
and that was the end for me. So yeah, that was a fabulous experience. Really
Is that
loved it.
is that when you went over to Analog Shift?
Yes.
Okay.
So in essence, what happened was in early 2016, Donald Trump started running for president, and it sadly had an impact on the jewelry brand.
Sure.
And I wanted to sort of go out on top. I was so proud of everything we had done, and I had such a good relationship with Ivanka, um, and we had grown a really nice little entity. Um, and I resigned. And on the very best of terms, it ended up being a wise move because by the end of that year, at the time I resigned, I didn't think Donald Trump was going to win, but by the end of the year, he obviously did, and the company closed.
Oh, interesting.
I had definitely, that was clearly the right thing.
Wow.
So, yeah, love Ivanka, had a great time. And so, in a sense, I have to attribute Donald Trump for my entering watches because it was, I mean, literally, I resigned because of the election in April of 2016 and joined Analog Shift at that point, and that launched my career in watches. Yeah, and that was really a great experience.
Is there something I'll get to analog in just a second? Is there anything that you either learned or carried out at the jewelry line that you still use today?
You know what I learned? It's a great question. I definitely learned about the inner workings of authorized dealers and
Ah,
retailers.
okay.
This Ivanka Trump, we had one store in Soho. It was
Hmm.
first on Madison Avenue, then in Soho. The rest of it, the jewelry was sold all over the world in retailers. So we were in approximately, I don't know, half the Neiman Marcuses in the country. We were in jewelry stores all over the country that were, so. And by the way, most, no, not most, but a large number of those retailers were watch dealers, sold watches.
As well,
So
yeah.
I was developing relationships with retailers. I mean, ones that we know now. I mean,
Hmm.
lots of the prominent watch retailers were carried of Ivanka Trump jewelry because a lot of the watch retailers, as everyone knows, they sell jewelry too. So I
Yeah,
learned the inner workings of a brand selling its product through retailers, and that was a great experience. And I developed a lot of relationships with those retailers.
sure.
Really a lot of fun.
So James Lambden and I are very good friends. He and I met when he was at his WeWork. So maybe shortly before you arrived, maybe
No,
a
I
couple of
was in that.
years.
I had a desk in that WeWork, my friend.
Yeah. Okay. So then maybe the same room. What was the goal at that time? And did you approach James? Did James approach you? Like how
No,
did you
that
guys?
he and Jacob Sotak, they were
Yeah, Jacob. Yeah.
partners, and
Yeah.
they approached me. I was a known collector because I was, I've always been a watch collector, and they approached me.
I see.
And what I was so impressed with what James and Jacob really had created was, at that time in particular, um, most of the purveyors of vintage watches, most of the dealers were there. It was a name. It was Andrew Shear, Eric Koo, you know,
Yep.
who it was, Matt Bain. Analog Shift actually had a brand name. It wasn't called James Landon or Jacob Sotak. It was called Analog Shift.
Right.
And so, to that degree, there was a certain degree of of it having been professionalized. That
Mm-hmm.
has not in any way saying that the other dealers were unprofessional. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying it was a company, and it was branded as an entity.
Right.
And um, that really intrigued me. It was being a watch dealer, and it was more professionalized because it was a company, and there was an office and a boutique in essence. Moreover, they had a bit of a cult following on Instagram. My
Mm-hmm.
recollection was they had something like 60,000 followers back then, which was a lot.
Yeah.
And I saw, and vintage watches were really just starting to take off. I mean, they were already popular, but it was really in growth mode. You're
Mm-hmm.
really talking about almost, you're talking about, um, like 10 years ago,
Right.
approximately. And I saw a lot of potential, that here was a brand that had a cult following, that had a meaningful presence on social media in an industry that was growing. Um, and I hopped aboard.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I was the CEO for almost approximately 3 years.
Okay. And then is that when you joined Sotheby's? Because I actually don't know when you joined Sotheby's.
No, it's not what I did actually. After Analog Shift, approximately 3 years, Analog Shift was sold to Watches of Switzerland, and I joined Philips. So I
Okay.
was in the Philips watch department for almost 4 years.
I see.
It was actually about 3.5 years. And then I was poached by Sotheby's,
Okay.
and I had a 6 months of garden leave and then a 6 month non compete. So I was very flattered, um, that Sotheby's hired me, knowing I couldn't start for a full year. That was really took me aback, that they would be willing to wait a whole year. So
Wow.
yeah, they approached me, and in truth, when they first did, I said no. I said I have a great thing going at Philips. I'm well treated, and it's
Mm-hmm.
going great. But I took the interview, and sort of, really liked what I heard, and I made this big leap. And I've been at Sotheby's a little over 2 years now. I'm the global head, and it's been just a fabulous experience. So
Awesome.
definitely made the right moves. Super happy I did it. I'm so well treated. Um, and I'm not drinking any Kool-Aid here either. I would say it if it weren't the case, but I'm very happy here and very well treated, and I appreciate, um, the entrepreneurial spirit that Sotheby's has, and all that they're allowing me to do, and even the way they embraced Rolliefest. I mean, you have
Yeah.
to give them credit. This is like a big legacy business that's been around for 200 years. Lots of companies say we embrace community, we embrace clients. It's very easy to talk the talk,
Right.
but do you really walk the walk? And I think Sotheby's really showed with Rolliefest in particular last week. Man, they totally embraced it, and really helped me. And most of the leadership of Sotheby's was in the room. And that really means something to me, and I'm grateful. I always felt as though the wind was at my back when I was planning it. The first time in 2023, I planned Rolliefest when I was on garden leave and during my non compete. I didn't have a job,
Oh
so it was
wow.
great.
Yeah, yeah.
Now I did it while also running the watch department at
Mm-hmm.
Sotheby's. It was like having a second job,
Right.
and they totally gave me the freedom to do it, supported it, let me take the time, and very grateful. And that is just absolute fact.
Yeah, totally. And prior to you joining and Vincent joining, I didn't know anybody at Sotheby's, and now having attended Rolliefest, I feel like I've either met current employees or former employees, and everybody was wonderful. So it does really seem like a great place to work. Uh, what would you say you spend the majority of your time doing in your current role there?
I do. I really have two hats. Half of it is managerial.
Sure.
As most people know, Sotheby's watch department is a pretty big entity into itself. We have a meaningful office in Hong Kong, a meaningful office in Geneva, a meaningful office in the United States. We have people in Dubai and London and Paris. There's watch specialists all over and auctions through the year. So um, I sort of get to I manage the organization.
Mm-hmm.
I'm by no means alone by any means. We have Sam Hines, who's a co-chairman in Hong Kong, and other great leaders. So half of my job is managing people and being involved on the marketing and certainly financial. I own the P&L. I'm definitely responsible.
Mm-hmm.
So there are strict targets and goals here. It isn't just, oh, try your best and whatever happens. I have goals. It's definitely a real business, and taken very seriously. So half my job is managerial, which includes managing the people, managing the P&L, the targets, and things like marketing and auction schedule and what have you, and all that goes into it. And then the other half, we have to be honest, is business getting. We
Mm-hmm.
don't make anything. We're selling watches that are entrusted to us by consigners.
Mm-hmm.
So I am out like any other watch specialist, trying to attract watches for sale. So I spend a tremendous amount of time. We call that business getting. Um, in my former life as a lawyer, it would be called rainmaking, and I spend a lot of time doing that naturally,
So
as every
if
watch specialist does. Yeah.
yeah, sure. If I hypothetically, if I were to get a job with Sotheby's and I was a business getter, um, am I then sort of responsible for seeing it through? Meaning responsible for that thing being sold, or does that get passed off, or does that sort of the position I'm now describing, does that even exist? Does somebody just go out find watches for you and say, okay, I'm on to the next one, and somebody else handles the auction?
No.
Okay.
So um, if there's no world where a watch specialist would bring a watch in from a consigner or a prospective consigner and then walk away from it and dump it on the team and say, good luck, go sell it. That definitely does not happen.
Okay. Okay.
It's a relationship business, is a business of trust. So
Yeah.
of course, if Wes gives Geoff a watch to consign, obviously, and needless to say, I'm going to make sure, I have to shepherd that watch through the process.
Right.
But most importantly, it's a big team effort.
Yeah.
So a watch comes in, it has to get photographed, written about, cataloged. It has to be promoted and marketed. Maybe it's in a video, maybe it's just on Instagram. There's traveling exhibitions where watches go all over the world in advance of sales.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes time to actually sell the sale, and the auction catalog gets published, and the whole team of specialists from around the globe are pushing to make sure those watches get sold, and we sell the sale. So it's absolutely a team effort. Um, but in no world would a watch get brought in and a specialist just walks away and says, okay,
Sure.
that's in the bucket. No, it's a team effort. And, in virtually every instance, a watch comes in, and the specialist whose client it is will take extra special care to ensure that that's shepherded until the end.
Sure. How does an auction house pick the name or the theme for an auction? Is the name established based on the watches found, or do you pick a name and then seek out the watches?
Well, truth be told, It's relatively uncommon to have a theme.
Okay.
Most of the time, a live auction is called like important watches. That's what we say. And our online sales are usually called fine watches.
Mhm.
Sometimes there's a theme. We had a big Hoyer, a sale of Hoyer of watches that we celebrated watches that race car drivers had driven,
Yeah.
in particular with respect to Hoyer. So we had, that kind of a theme. So the title was, something along those lines, champions and that kind of thing. But
Mhm.
usually I can't say it is somewhat unusual, not unheard of by any means, but to have a real theme. It's usually important watches and fine watches. We have an online sale and a live sale. And so I'll tell you, our last sale in June, we had the great fortune of having 7-minute repeaters.
Wow.
That was really extraordinary. And so we called it Important Watches Take a Minute.
Oh.
So I thought that was kind of fun. So, yeah, so that's an example of having a title.
Yeah.
But most of the time, I don't think we really have too many titles.
Yeah. I was going to ask if there's like a theme you'd love to see that hasn't been done yet.
That's a good question. I think I'm not sure. That's something to
Okay.
think about.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's the strangest thing you've ever witnessed during an auction?
The strangest thing I've ever witnessed during an auction.
Like something where you're like, well, good God, this is a first. That maybe something like that.
How about when I was at Phillips and somebody paid, I think it was $90,000 for a Hulk?
No way.
Yeah, we can correct me if I'm wrong. I think that was the number, and it was just like, what is going on here? And remember, it takes two to tango. You can't
Yeah.
have one person; it's got to be two people.
Yes.
And that's the kind of thing where cynics would say that can't be possible. This has to be fake. And of course, it was not. It was completely legitimate. I think it was 90. Um,
Wow.
but it was, and I remember thinking, God, this is just two people that just have to have this watch, and it was completely legit, and they paid for it and took it home, and that's that. So that those kind of funny things happen.
That's unreal.
And
Do
I've
you?
had some joyous experiences that weren't so crazy. But anyway,
Mhm.
keep going. I'm sorry.
No, 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 no. No, this is all about you. um, do you buy pieces to celebrate for yourself or to like mark an occasion or anything like that?
I can't say I really do that. I mean, look, the thrill of the hunt is such a
Yeah.
big part of watch collecting.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you'll have your heart set on something and go out and find it, and other times something will just surface, like that Panerai I told you about. I mean, I
Sure.
never would have been out looking for it. I just saw it on eBay and was wow. So, you know, um, but I can't say I'm at a stage in my collecting life where I'll say, I think I'll buy a watch for my birthday.
Right, right.
The only exception is I have a 34 millimeter vintage Rolex reference 6694 from 1965 that I wore on the day of the birth of my son.
Awesome.
Um, and that's a common story.
Mm-hmm.
What made it uncommon, and I bought it in essence for him, but what made it uncommon, two things made it uncommon. First, my son's name is Cooper. He turns 7 next month. Actually,
Awesome.
this month because it's October 1st
Yeah,
now. But
yeah.
um, the engraving on the back says, "Cooper, I'll always be with you. Love, Dad." So, I'm going to give that to him at some point. I purposely wore a 34 millimeter watch because I want it to be small, because I don't want to wait till he's 20 to wear it. He could, have that when he's 13. So,
That's great.
and what the real funny part of the story, which a lot of people know, is that I wore it on the day he was born, and at 30 seconds to life, they put him into a bassinet, and his foot was still blue.
Mm-hmm.
I did something, and I knew at the time, and I'm just, pardon my French, but
Mm-hmm.
I knew it was fucked up at the moment I did it. And I took a wrist shot before picking up my son. So at 30 seconds to life, I held up my wrist, took a picture of him. I have the photo, and I did that to always prove to him that this was the watch I wore that day and it was meant for you. And I remember lifting my wrist up saying, "Oh my God, this is the most beautiful moment in life." And the first priority was to get a wrist shot rather than hold my newborn child. Um, so that is so messed up. But I would do it again. It obviously took all of 2 seconds, but I have this great wrist shot of the watch in front of this, beautiful little baby in a bassinet in the hospital. Um, and forever he'll see that. And that was the watch I wore when he was born. And he'll get that, certainly in the next 6, 7 years, 6 years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one could argue, you've got the rest of your life to hold the kid. You've only got 2 seconds to
Yeah.
take that photo.
Yep. Yep. But I knew it was demented. And I literally remember going, this is so messed up. I mean, am I going to hell for this? This is
Oh
like
my
a
God.
terrible thing to do.
That's so funny.
But I'm proud of it. And the photo is just great.
Yeah, that's amazing. What's a trait that you would attribute your success to?
I got that's an easy one for me.
Okay.
And I'm known for this. I have an expression. Vincent talks about it a lot because he
Okay.
said he uses it. Honesty makes you bulletproof. I always tell the truth. I've learned in life that it makes you bulletproof. People are willing to forgive mistakes when they're honest ones.
Mm-hmm.
Um, where people get tripped up is when they hide the ball and the cover up.
Mm-hmm.
And we see that in every industry. We see it in
Mm-hmm.
watches. We see it in every industry. Who are we kidding? That's part of life. But I sleep very well at night and I have no skeletons because I know I don't have to look over my shoulder. I've always tell the truth.
Yeah.
And that just gives me a great sense of comfort. And I think it leads to people trusting you and they know you're telling the truth. And sometimes the truth isn't a happy answer.
Mm-hmm.
But if you tell the truth, I think people respect it. And I definitely attribute, um, if I had you ask me for the one single trait, it would be that. And there is no amount of money in which I will bend that principle.
Yeah.
Period, full stop. Everybody in the office knows it. I preach it. And period, without exception, I tell the truth.
Well, and I mean, obviously that's admirable, but also that's crucial when dealing with vintage watches as well. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of places things could be hidden. So that's great, man. I mean, I try to.
Absolutely. I certainly make mistakes. I
Sure.
make quite a few like everybody else,
Right.
but they're always honest ones.
Yep.
It's the dishonest mistakes that people don't forgive.
Hmm.
You make a mistake and you tell somebody, I messed up, I made a mistake, this is what happened, I apologize. In almost every instance,
Hmm.
people can accept that. But when they're fraudulent and you play a game, that's where you get, you can't recover from that in life.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, if you can't trust someone, I mean, it's over, right? Like, I mean, if you've lost trust, it's done.
Very hard to recover. And yeah, so that's it for me, period.
That's great. I know you wear some modern pieces as well. What percentage split would you say is your collection, modern to vintage?
Probably 50-50. I
Is
mean,
it?
the watch I wear, so often is my modern steel ceramic Daytona. I have the white dial, the new version.
Oh, nice.
And somebody once said to me that that really could be the basis of a one watch collection.
Yeah.
And and I agree with that. I mean, honestly, you really, I almost don't need anything else. It's
So
indestructible. It can, it's sporty. It's just trendy enough. It's beautifully made. It's coveted. It holds its value. It can be worn, dressy, down, casual. It's perfect
Hmm.
size. It's got it all. It's got every bucket. I'm the original owner, so um,
So here's my question to you, as someone who loves the Daytona. I think my first Rolex that I ever fell in love with was actually the Zenith Daytona, and obviously that does not have a ceramic bezel. However, I tried one on earlier this year, and in certain lights, if the light's not hitting it just right, the bezel almost looks black. So
Yeah.
you could almost argue that the newest one is the closest representation while still being modern and still being updated. Obviously it's, I guess, maybe some people may refute this, maybe not, but the new one I would imagine is maybe more robust than the Zenith in certain circumstances. Um, would would you go Zenith if that's what your heart's content, or through the Arc would you just get a new one because it's at retail it's cheaper?
I don't think there's a good answer for that. Yeah, I mean that.
That's not what I want, Geoff. That's not what I want.
Look, that's a personal taste.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The notion. It's interesting. I discussed this once with Ben Clymer. The notion of aspirational piece and what
Mm,
does the new collector aspire to own.
mm-hmm.
When I started collecting vintage Rolex, the aspirational piece was a Paul Newman screw pusher. At some point in that journey it was a Zenith Daytona, and
Right.
then a Big Red, as we talked about earlier. So it's very reasonable to say that you aspire to own that vintage or neo vintage in the case of Zenith. And maybe you aspire to own a Patrizzi dial.
Mm-hmm.
So, or maybe you aspire to own a porcelain dial.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, that's a part of that rabbit hole, that great journey. And nowadays, it's interesting. I'm not so sure that every Daytona lover's aspirational piece is um, is a screw pusher Paul Newman. I think as we get on in life, Paul Newman becomes a little bit less relevant as a person. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think a lot of people's aspirational piece would be a rainbow Daytona. There's definitely a segment of our hobby that would rather have a rainbow than a screw pusher Paul Newman. And one is not better than the other. And it's sort of to each his own. Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah, I sort of liken that. Do you aspire to have a rainbow or a screw pusher Newman? That's no different. Do you want to have a Zenith Daytona from the year 2000 or 99, or do you want a 2024, 2025 modern steel ceramic? Tough call. That's an aesthetic.
Yeah. 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 Totally. What was the hardest piece to get like tracked down? Like what was like
Ooh, that's a great
the hardest
question.
piece to acquire for you?
The hardest piece that I ever acquired. Great question. Um,
Now, I guess it could be like, was it hard to find or was it just tough financially?
well, tough financially. God, I've had that so many times.
Yeah, join the club.
I've lived on ed. Not. I've always lived responsibly. That's a very good. You touch on a very good. I'm not deflecting your question, but
No,
you
no,
touch
no.
on a very good question. Um, Gush Monday, who owns the branding company Bulletproof, fantastic company. He's just a spectacular collector. He
Mhm.
did all the branding for Rolliefest
Cool.
this year, and last year for that matter, and 2 years ago. But he said to me, "You have to own the watch. The watch can't own you."
Yep.
And that always struck a chord with me. And when we talk about finance, you trigger that memory
Mm-hmm.
that when you pay too much for a watch or you live like on the edge, maybe just beyond your means, sometimes the watch owns you and it isn't so fun. Um,
Yeah.
I always prefer to own the watch. I never want a watch to own me. I thought that was so well said.
Yep.
And if you're buying at the appropriate price at a level you can afford, you'll own the watch, and you're going to have a better experience than if it feels like you need a mortgage and boy, you shouldn't really own it. And oh my God, you see dollar signs every time you look at your wrist. That's
Right.
pressure.
Yeah.
So, and every watch collector after a while has experienced that because we always strive to buy the very best example. When you're buying vintage, it's a long cliche by now, buy the very best example you can, and the market catches up. So we've all stretched and we've all felt that pinch. but I've always lived within my means, and I've always tried to buy watches that I own and not watches that would own me.
Right. Yeah. No, it's solid advice. Um, what's the hardest piece to acquire, though?
Hardest piece, I don't own it anymore, but my 5517 mil sub that I
Oh,
bought
wow.
from Jed McCormick, Jedley in
Hmm.
Australia. He's really, if I had to point to one person who was my mentor in watches, it would be Jed.
Oh, wow.
And he really got me into a lot of this and taught me a whole lot. Um, there's a reason why he sits next to me at Rolliefest.
Yeah.
I really love the guy, and he found a number of pieces for me, including that one. And that was a great example of, I started with a 5513 and eventually traded up to a 5517. That was very hard. There were very few full spec, as we say, um, um, 5517s left, full spec, meaning with a 60-minute bezel, with sword hands, with the soldered bars, the
Hmm.
fixed bars, um, and a Henry Hudson letter, which is a letter from a guy named Henry Hudson who passed away, who used to um, give you the origin of the watch and where it was delivered to by Rolex.
Oh, wow.
So there are very few of those, and one eventually came to me through Jed, and that was a real tough one. I really felt like I had made it in the Submariner world when I owned that one. Wow. So, but like the collecting arc, I eventually let it go. And of course, I miss it, but you can't keep it all. It's a world of limited dollars, and I have no regrets in that respect. Um, so yeah,
The
that
tough one.
probably was the toughest to find.
Yeah. What was the last concert you went to?
Last concert I went to, um, I'll give you two,
Okay.
both in Saratoga Springs, New York.
Oh, SPAC?
SPAC.
Yeah.
So
Great
my
venue.
other love in life, my happiest place on earth is the Saratoga racetrack.
Hmm.
I've gone to the Saratoga racetrack for 35 straight years. My grandfather took my dad took me, I now take my son. I've sat at the same table at the track for 30 years.
Wow.
It's my happiest place on earth. And every year, without fail, the only exception being COVID, when the track was closed for 1 year, the first week in August, I'm there. As you just suggested, SPAC is the Saratoga Performing Arts Center.
Hmm.
That's right there in Saratoga. And I always try to go see something. And the last two concerts I saw were John Legend, which was terrific.
Nice.
And the other one was even more special, believe it or not, a little weird, was the Philadelphia Orchestra performed the Tchaikovsky's 1812 Overture.
Wow.
Lest you think, oh my God, shoot me. Really, what made that so much fun was, and everybody knows the 1812 Overture, and I'm not going to sing it today, but if you heard it, you'd certainly know it. It
Hmm.
was set to live cannons and live fireworks.
Oh, wow.
So there were literally cannons going off with live fireworks, and it was so exciting. So I really loved it. It was a really cool experience to look up into the sky, see the fireworks, hear the roar of the cannons while the Philadelphia Orchestra played. That was pretty dramatic. That was really memorable.
Unreal. Was that July 4th?
No, it was the first week in August.
Oh, okay. Obviously, since you were up there already.
It was 2 months ago. Yeah.
You've always been so nice to ask me about my daughter. And I really appreciate you doing that. And the fact that you remember her name and will randomly text me, "How is Kaya?" Um, it really does mean a lot to me. So I'm kind of curious as to how fatherhood has changed you.
Um, Great question. I was the kid who really thought he was never going to have a child, and I almost didn't want one. I was a little bit selfish and wanted my freedom, and I think I was a little bit fearful of having that level of commitment and having a dependent.
Hmm.
But I also knew that um, most women, if I can generalize, want a child. And I knew that if I met the right woman, the likelihood is she would want a child. And I met Lindsay, and lots of people know that story. She worked at Panerai, and I walked into the boutique and I married the girl behind the counter. It's a long story, but
Amazing.
and sure enough, Lindsay wanted to have a child, and I did. And it would have been a horrible tragedy had I not had that experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so foolish previously to think I didn't want a child, because it was the best thing I ever did. And it's my greatest joy in life. I would take a bullet for my son in a New York minute, without any thought. I've never experienced love like this. The greatest thing in the world. When I have difficult days, I think of him. And I laugh when I think about all the worries. Is this watch polished? I mean, oh my God, none of it matters. So it's completely changed me. It's a love I've never knew. That must sound very cliched, but it's totally true. And how ignorant was I, and what a tragedy it would have been if I had not discovered this joy in my life.
Yeah.
We
Well
got to get
said.
him into watches. We got to get him into watches. I'm working on it.
Yeah, that's right.
The Peppa Pig watch wasn't well received, so I got to come up with something else for this 6-year-old.
Right. Geoff, thank you, man. This was awesome.
Thank you. I so appreciate your taking interest. So appreciate you having shared in Rolliefest last week. It means so much. It's all about the people, and without you, it's nothing. So love you, brother.
Love you too. Thank you so much. I'm going to send you photos of Kaya here momentarily.
I want to see.
Okay, buddy. Talk to you soon.
Talk soon.
This wraps up this episode of the Standard H podcast. If you like what you heard, I'd love it if you'd share it with a friend or two. And if you have a moment, please rate and review the show, as it helps others discover these episodes. It absolutely helps far more than you realize. Shout out to Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful for the theme track. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.